Welcome back. Joining us now from the great state of Georgia is Stacey Abrams. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you.
Stacey Abrams, we all, of course, saw your response to the President's State of the Union on Tuesday, but we want to ask, what was your day like before your rebuttal, and what was your night like after?
So that morning I got up, I did a final read-through of the speech, wanting to make sure that not only did it read well physically, but that when I said it out loud, I wasn't popping my peas and I hadn't included words that would be very difficult to say if I suddenly got thirsty. Then I watched about 3 episodes of Doctor Who and just kind of chilled out.
Hang on. Like this season Doctor Who, or like back in the day Doctor Who?
So I'm catching up. I started watching the new iteration of Doctor Who probably about a year ago. So I watched the last season of Peter Capaldi and then all of the new. But I had to go all the way back because over New Year's they did a Doctor Who marathon on BBC. So I'm now up to season 8. So I just watched the end of Matt Smith and the oncoming of Peter Capaldi.
Okay, so what was the evening like after the rebuttal? Was it more Doctor Who?
It was not more Doctor Who. I was a little wound up because I did not make any huge gaffes. I was very proud of myself, but all of the pent-up energy was back. So I came back to my house. My younger sister was with me, as was my campaign manager and a dear friend, and we watched the feedback. I saw Fox News say something nice about me, which I think surprised us both, and watched MSNBC. And then stayed up late making ground beef stew because I was too wound up to go to sleep until about 3:30 in the morning.
Relatable. Wow. Relatable. Did you by any chance watch Bernie Sanders' rebuttal, or did you have any issues with him giving his own address after yours?
I believe that every person who stands in public office has the right to speak to the issues that they care about. I'm proud of the work that I was able to do on behalf of the Democratic Party as the official responder, but I take no exception to other people who want to be heard as well.
You are, of course, a noted voting rights activist. That was true before you ran and certainly during the campaign. Have you seen any substantive progress on voting rights in the state of Georgia since midterms?
I've seen a strong uptick in interest and in conversation. We know through an Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll that 71% of Georgians believe that we need to take some action. They're very concerned about our voting machines. We know that there's now a voting rights caucus at the Capitol that has bipartisan support, and I'm very proud of that work. Georgia's about to spend a lot of money on new machines, and the goal is to make certain that it doesn't become a cronyism moment where the new governor gives a $150 million contract to the former employer of his deputy chief of staff, but instead we have hand-marked paper ballots so that every vote gets counted. And this is a bipartisan push, so I'm excited about that. But we've got a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. Have you spoken to Brian Kemp since the election? And if not, what would you say if you could?
I have not spoken to him. And I would say what I said on the night of my non-concession speech. I pray for his success. I want him to do well by the state of Georgia. Unfortunately, I think his behavior as Secretary of State, his rhetoric on the campaign trail, both signal a difficult transition to being a good governor. But hopefully he will do the right thing. I mean, unfortunately, he's already broken a promise to teachers, and he is only allocating $1 million to solve a multi-million-dollar challenge that we have with healthcare. I think he needs to expand Medicaid immediately, take the money, and save lives in Georgia. But, again, as I said about President Trump, my responsibility as a citizen is to want our leaders to be successful. But my responsibility as a citizen and as a political leader is to also encourage them to do the right thing to achieve that success.
Earlier this morning, one of our regular viewers, Princess Leia, tweeted this question for you. How did Stacey Abrams cope with the blatant voter suppression during the election? I can imagine it was emotionally taxing and incredibly frustrating. So how did she keep her head up and make it day by day? How would you answer that?
Part of the responsibility of those of us who are fighting for voting rights is to not let the other side win, because voter suppression is successful in 2 ways. One is by actually physically blocking people from voting, but the other is by scaring people out of voting. My responsibility in that 3-week period when we saw just how egregious his behavior was to remind people that we can't let them win by giving up. We have to keep fighting. And I can't tell other people to fight if I'm not willing to do it myself.
Well, earlier this morning, of course, we were talking about the developing controversy in Virginia. And listen, you are someone who has obviously thought very deeply about how to lead a state in the South. I wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for Virginia about a pathway forward?
Virginia's laws are different than those in Georgia, and there are real consequences for how they handle this situation. I actually know Lieutenant Governor Fairfax. I've had the opportunity to talk to Governor Northam. I do not know the Attorney General, but I know this. These are men who have tried to do the right thing in their professional lives, but I think they have to grapple with their private and personal decisions. My hope is that they will come together, not only within their families, but with the communities to figure out the appropriate path forward. We want Virginia to be successful. We want the state to continue to make the progress it's making on criminal justice reform, on Medicaid expansion, on re-enfranchisement of ex-felons. They're doing good things, but those things have to be seen as credible. And so I just encourage the ongoing conversations that are happening and for people to take personal responsibility for their decisions.
Should Northam resign?
Again, I'm speaking to a broader conversation because I know that this is a difficult issue. I believe racism is wrong. I believe racist words and racist deeds require amends. And I would ask the state of Virginia, especially the governor, to think about what amends properly looks like in their state.
Well, listen, everyone is already getting ready for 2020, and a lot of people are talking you up as a potential candidate. Is there any chance you're thinking about throwing your hat in the ring?
As I've said, I'm thinking about everything. I gave myself a deadline of the end of March to make a decision about what I'm going to do next. And that means I think about all things. But that's just the way my mind works. I don't believe in cutting off opportunities or foregoing ideas. But often what you find is if you think about something that may seem beyond your scope, you find something in the middle you never thought about.
Well, if it helps at all, we have a tweet here from my own grandmother, Dolores Elder Jones, resident of Garland, Texas. She said, let Stacey know that when she runs for president, she has an 80-something-year-old volunteer. So just passing that on to you.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Jones. I look forward to having your help whenever I get ready to run for whatever I'm doing next.
For whatever I'm doing next. Let's talk about what that whatever could mean. Here's a tweet from the AJC's Tamar Hollerman. Fresh off Stacey Abrams' State of the Union rebuttal, Donald Trump tells the AJC and other regional reporters that it's a mistake for her to run against Senator David Perdue in 2020. I don't think she can win. Now, you've already responded to the president once this week. What would your rebuttal be to that quote?
I do not take political advice from Donald Trump.
Okay. Fair. Let's say you don't run in 2020 at all. Is there an option? And you said, I know you're looking at different possibilities, but I did wonder if you could be more specific about another possible path you could see in terms of how you might play a role in the 2020 primary.
Well, regardless of what I do personally, my mission is to make certain that Georgia is seen as a battleground state. That's one of the reasons the fight for fair elections is so important. We started Fair Fight Action because we need every single Democratic candidate, not only in the primary, but both candidates in the general election to see Georgia as a battleground state, because that means that they're paying attention to the needs of 10.5 million people, and that will shape the narrative of the election. My responsibility as a strong Democrat, as someone who loves this state, as someone who loves the South, is to make sure we put more Southern states in play. When we are in play, we get better responses from our national leaders, and we get better choices made on our behalf. And so my mission, regardless of who runs for what, is to make sure that they know that they need to come to Georgia, and I'll be ready to help the Democrat win the White House.
All right. Now, listen, I want to ask one last question about the rebuttal. You opened with such an beautiful story. And so we also know you're an award-winning romance author. So how did your experience kind of writing novels help you write that rebuttal?
So, yeah, I'm very proud of the fact that I write lots of different things. I write romance as Selena Montgomery. I recently wrote a memoir that's being released as a paperback called Lead from the Outside. It came out as Minority Leader last year. I've also written very scintillating articles on the operational dissonance of the unrelated business income tax exemption. So I like to think that I bring all of my writing skills to bear. And hopefully what I was able to do in the rebuttal was to take the part that knows how to tell a story, to bring people in, but then to use that moment of connection to talk about the real issues that ground us and connect us, and then close with inspiration to say we can get this done. And so hopefully I use my tax attorney self and my romance writing self and my memoir self to give us advice about how we can be our better selves as Americans.
Well, you certainly made an incredibly compelling case for the two of us that night and for our viewers this morning. Stacey Abrams, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you both so much for having me. It's been delightful.